So hello dear students, today we will discuss some methods that can be used for separating the components of a mixture. As you know, mixture is a substance which is having a number of type of particles mixed in it in a non-definite ratio, right? So as you know, the mixtures are of two types, maybe homogeneous or maybe heterogeneous. If it is the case of heterogeneous mixture where the particles are clearly visible to the naked eyes and the particles are easily identifiable, these particles can be easily separated by the simple process like filtration or sedimentation, something like that. But the mixtures which are having a uniform composition or where the particles are not visible to the naked eyes, then we cannot separate them by the simple process of filtration or sedimentation. In that case, you have to use special techniques for separating the components of mixture, right? There are various techniques available, but which technique should be chosen for separating the component of a particular mixture? That depends on the nature of components of the mixture. So here in this video today we will discuss some of the methods that are used for this separation process. But before that, you must be wondering, what is the need of separating the components of the mixture? If these are mixture, let them in the form of mixture. Why are we separating them? Because there are a number of reasons for which we have to separate a particular component from a particular mixture. For example, the various material which we obtain from the nature. In nature they are not in pure form and we have to purify them for specific reasons. For example, the grains, the cereals that we buy from the market, they may have some agricultural waste mixed with it. There may be some covering of the seeds. There may be some fine sand or stone particles that are not fit for consumption. So of course, we use these cereals or grains for consumption. Before that, these particles or unwanted materials must be removed from here. There are a number of medicines that we obtain from the trees, from nature. So of course, from the tree you have to separate that particular component which is useful for us, right? And so many examples you observe where we have to use the separation method or separation technique for one reason or the other. So today in this lecture we will discuss about some of the methods that can be used for separation process. Here the first simpler method here is evaporation. So evaporation, when this process can be used? This process can be used when one of the components of the mixture is volatile and other is non-volatile. In simple words, you can say the evaporation process can be used to separate a volatile component from a non-volatile component, right? Then the process used here is known as evaporation. For example, if you want to separate the dye from ink, or the same process can be used for separating salt from seawater, then we use the process that is known as evaporation. For that process, let's take an activity to explain how dye from ink can be separated. As you know, the ink that is used in pens has got basically two components. One is the liquid component which provides it the fluidity, and the another one is the coloring agent or coloring material which has been added to provide it the color. So that coloring material is what? That coloring material is dye. So in order to separate the components of the dye, of the ink, take a tripod stand on which put a beaker containing some amount of water, and on this beaker put a watch glass containing the ink from where you have to separate the dye, right? So here you have taken water in the watch glass, and here in the beaker and in the watch glass you have taken ink. So now you put a burner and start heating the water. Then what happens? This water evaporates. Water vapor rise up, and these water vapors, they come in contact with watch glass, so that the components of watch glass get heated up. After some time you will see all the liquid part has evaporated, and you are left only some solid coloring material, and that coloring material is dye of the ink. So here this separation would have been possible only because the coloring material or dye is non-volatile and the solvent of this mixture was volatile. Clear? And other example of evaporation, as I have given you, it can be used for separating salt from seawater. As you know, since earlier times we have been obtaining salt from seawater, and from seawater it is obtained by the process of evaporation. The seawater is evaporated so that water evaporates out, leaving behind the salt. There is another point that seawater not only contains the common salt or salt that we use for adding to our food. Other than that, it has number of other impurities also, like it may be having other salts like calcium chloride, magnesium chloride, salts of potassium and so on. So from that, the other salts are separated by other process, but the first method which is used for separating the salt from seawater is the process of evaporation. Clear? Another method which we can use for separating the components of the mixture is a process known as centrifugation. The centrifugation process is based on the principle that when a mixture is rotated at a very high speed, the heavier particles settle down and lighter particles come to the surface. So this centrifugation process is based on the principle that if you rotate a mixture at a very high speed, the heavier particles under the influence of gravity, they settle down, and the lighter particles, they come to the surface. There are so many examples of separation process of centrifugation. For example, centrifugation is used for separating butter from curd, or it can be used for separating cream from milk. For that purpose also it is used. It is also used for drying clothes. In dryers of washing machines, and same centrifugation process is used in pathological laboratories for blood and urine test. As you know, our blood is also a mixture. It is a colloidal mixture where there is a liquid part that is known as serum, and in this serum what happens, the blood cells, they remain suspended. The blood cells like RBCs, WBCs and platelets, etc. So if you take some blood in a test tube and keep it in the centrifugation machine and rotate it at very high speed, then what happens? You will observe that the blood cells, they settle down at the bottom, and the clear transparent liquid, that is serum, that comes to the surface, right? So you must have seen in your homes your mother separating curd from butter. In that process, separating butter from curd, in that process what is done, it is churned at very high speed in mixers or grinders. Then what happens, the butter being lighter, it comes on the surface, and at the bottom the curd or the liquid lighter part, heavier part is left. Similarly in dairies, the cream is separated from milk. You must have heard about the skimmed milk or a toned milk and double toned milk. The toned and double toned milk means from where the cream or the fat portion already has been removed. So that also done. In that case, the milk is churned or rotated at high speed so that the creamy portion, the fatty portion being lighter, it comes on the surface, and the other part that remain settle down, right? Another very interesting example of centrifugation which we observe in our daily life is the drying of clothes in dryers. You must have seen in your homes that the clothes after being washed are dried in dryers. So in dryer tub your wet clothes are kept. It is made to rotate at high spin. So the clothes being heavier, they remain settled down, and the water particles, they expel out from the pores that are present in dryer tub. So these are few examples to give you an idea about the another method of purification, that is known as centrifugation, right? Then another trick which is used for separating the components of the mixture is by using separating funnels. So third method here is by using separating funnel. Separating funnel is used to separate two immiscible liquids. For example, it is used for separating a mixture of oil and water. You know very well that if in a beaker or in a container you take a mixture of oil and water, then you observe two separate layers. The lower layer is of water, as water is heavier, and you can observe a clear-cut separate layer of oil. So oil makes an upper layer because oil is lighter than water. Now if you try to pour it down, if you try to tilt the beaker and pour down thinking that oil is making upper layer and it will be separated first and then water will be left behind, it doesn't happen so, because if it is the case of flow, then both the liquids start flowing down simultaneously, and in this case you won't be able to separate water and oil by this simple process. So here for this purpose we have to use a special designed apparatus that is known as separating funnel. Separating funnel is almost a conical shaped funnel, something like that, having here a stopcock which is used here for controlling the flow of the liquid, and here we have a lid also. So now in order to separate the components of the mixture, say you are having a mixture of oil and water, so when we pour down this mixture, of course the lower layer is of water and there is a separate upper layer is of oil. Now we put the separating funnel on a stand, tripod stand, for some time for undisturbed, so that the two layers of the liquids are clearly separated. Now you put a beaker at the surface and carefully open the stopcock, so you will see the liquid forming the lower layer, here water, starts diluting out, starts flowing out, and that way the water is collected here in this container. As soon as you see the whole of the water has diluted out, carefully turn off the stopcock so that only water is coming out, not the oil, right? And now replace the other beaker and you can collect the oil in another beaker. So here is the use of separating funnel for separating the components of two immiscible liquids. Another example which can be used, where this separating funnel is used, is during extraction of iron. In extraction of iron, impurities that are also known as slag and molten iron is also separated by this process of using a separating funnel like structure. So if we talk about iron, you know the iron is a metal which we obtain from the earth crust in various forms, and these ores of iron, they are having number of impurities there that need to be removed here. For that purpose, a specially designed pear-shaped tall furnace, which is also known as blast furnace, is used. In this tall blast furnace, at the bottom, there are two outlets given. One is for the removal of molten iron and the another upper one is for removal of slag. So at the time of extraction of iron, what is done here in the extraction of iron? You take a mixture of the crushed ore and sand and coke that is allowed to flow down, so that passes here and number of chemical reactions take place here. And at the bottom of the furnace, what you observe here is after the number of sequences of reactions, at the bottom there are two separate layers. The one lower layer is of molten iron and the upper layer is of molten slag. As these are two immiscible liquids, so they can be separated here easily by the two outlets. In this way, the iron is extracted from its ore and separated by the process of this using separating funnel, right? Another method which is used for separation of components of a mixture is the process known as sublimation. So another process here is sublimation. You know what is sublimation? Sublimation is a process which is used for separating the components of a mixture where one of the component is having property of sublimation and another one is not having the property of sublimation. And you remember what is sublimation? Sublimation means when we heat a solid and solid is directly converted to vapor state without getting converted to the liquid. So sublimation technique is used to separate a sublimable component from non-sublimable component. So when in your mixture one of the component is having the property of sublimation and another one is not having the property of sublimation, then this technique can be used. If we look at some examples of the substances showing you sublimation, the most common example is camphor, and another one here you can see is naphthalene. Camphor is used in worshipping also, and it is also used in number of medicinal purposes. Naphthalene we use in our woolen clothes. When we keep them during summers, we put their balls, naphthalene balls, and when you put, initially you were observing that these balls were big in size, but in the next winters when you reopen your woolens, you find that these balls have become very small, or they almost have disappeared without leaving any residue. So where that naphthalene ball has gone? It has sublimed, and the vapors of that naphthalene has spread in all over our clothes, giving you the smell of the naphthalene, right? Another one here, the example is other than naphthalene there is anthracene, and there is ammonium chloride, which is having formula NH4Cl, or benzoic acid. These are the common examples of the substances showing you phenomena of sublimation. So how is sublimation used? For example, you have to separate a mixture of sand and camphor, or you want to separate a mixture of common salt like sodium chloride and ammonium chloride. For that purpose, what is done? Here again on a tripod stand you put a wire gauge, and on that you put a china dish containing the mixture which has to be separated. So here like we have taken a mixture of sand and camphor. Here at the china dish we put a porous filter paper, and on that here we put an inverted funnel. And the opening of the funnel is blocked with the help of cotton, and now you start heating the mixture with the help of a burner. So what happens? Camphor being sublimable, it sublimes, rises up, and the vapors get condensed here at the walls of funnel, right? And when you see all the camphor has been sublimed, you turn off the burner, then you can remove the funnel, and from here this funnel you can easily separate carefully the camphor or whatever is the sublimable material, right? So that is another method of separating the components, that is sublimation, which is used when one of the component is having property of sublimation and another one is not. And there are some more methods for separating the components like chromatography and distillation and fractional distillation, about which we will be discussing in our next lecture. Goodbye till then, have a nice time.